everyone. COVID-19 brought travel to a grinding halt. Closed borders, localized regulations, quarantine rules, canceled flights, closed hotels, not to mention fears of getting infected, all contributed to travelers staying home. But now, as travel restrictions are slowly being lifted, are travelers ready to travel again? When and how? What factors give them the confidence to take off? We explored these themes in a recent research study. When it comes to planning trips during COVID, people are concerned about protecting their health, but they're also concerned about protecting their pockets. COVID conditions can change on the drop of a dime, and travelers know that changing trip plans can lead to lost money. Because of this, 69 to 79% of travelers stress flexible bookings and only want to book with providers who offer flexible cancellations or changes. And they express that they want to know about this early while they're still researching. The flexibility or lack thereof shouldn't be a surprise that they find out about once they are ready to book. COVID has truly upended timelines for trip planning, and travelers are choosing for themselves how they want to adjust exactly. The majority of travelers are changing their research and booking timelines, but they're not necessarily changing them in one specific way. Many travelers express they'll start researching further in advance of the trip, and booking windows are also shortening. But French travelers are charting a more spontaneous course, researching and booking closer to the trip. All of the concerns aside, the wanderlust still persists. In most markets, over half of travelers were expressing that leisure travel is still considered an important part of their lifestyle during COVID. However, they see the need to prioritize their personal health right now. Up to 78% of travelers are forming trip plans around the fear that they could contract COVID in transit or at their destination. Travelers over 55 who feel more vulnerable to serious side effects of COVID are also more likely to express a secondary concern that they may not have good medical care at the destination that they want to visit. The fear of losing mobility because of quarantining, either at the destination or when they're back home, takes away some of the ease and the breeziness of being on holiday and is affecting the way that travelers plan their trips during the pandemic. Though we are seeing signs that people are itching to travel, there's really no place like home. The sudden cascade of closures in the winter and spring are still impressed upon travelers, and up to 55% of them are thinking about the risk of getting stranded as they plan. February and March feel like eons ago right now, but the effects from this period have not been erased with time. But comfort with travel is expected to increase over time, especially domestically. As of late July, up to 41% of travelers were already willing to travel domestically. The numbers for intent to travel abroad, however, are trailing behind. About 9 in 10 of people who intend to travel within a year are planning for at least one domestic trip, but the numbers are weaker for international trips within Europe and weaker still for travel outside of Europe, especially among Spaniards and Italians. Travelers who aren't comfortable taking trips right now are holding out for signs that it will be safer for them to travel again in the future. I want to start this topic off by calling out something that may feel notably absent. When we asked travelers about these issues back in March, we found that a top concern for travelers was that lodging, dining, or attraction closures would prevent them from having a full experience in a destination. Those are no longer major sources of concern. Travelers have really internalized the idea that destinations are beckoning, and the largest barriers for them now are more focused on safety and convenience than what is currently open. Travelers want to minimize their chances of getting sick. And while a vaccine can certainly do that for people, travelers are watching for a decrease in infection rates at their destination more than waiting on a vaccine, though that will certainly encourage people in the future. The decrease in infection rates at a destination is actually the most commonly cited change that would make travelers feel comfortable going on trips again. This is true in all markets that we tested it in and applies for both domestic and international travel. So travelers will want to know when infection rates drop in a given destination, and it can go a long way in boosting their impressions of safety and their willingness to travel. This is not to say that a vaccine won't be extremely helpful in the long run. a vaccine can help travelers feel more comfortable selecting types of travel that may be viewed as more risky. I'll cover what's considered risky later in more detail. There are also many potential travelers we surveyed who are writing off any plans to travel until a vaccine becomes available. So for destinations that can be commonly accessed by cars, draw more local or domestic travelers in general, or offer a lot of outdoor activities where it's easy to distance, a vaccine isn't likely to be as critical of a development as long as fewer people in the area are catching COVID. But if this isn't the case, it's more likely that we'll see a wave of recovery when infection rates are lower at the destination, and then another major wave when a vaccine becomes available. Quarantine also presents major concerns for convenience and enjoyment of a trip, and travelers who are still hesitant are waiting to see that mandatory quarantines will be lifted. This isn't just the case for destination quarantines that can be fully interruptive to a holiday. Travelers frequently report that they'll feel more comfortable if quarantines are lifted at home as well, and that they'll be able to seamlessly transition from holiday back to their normal routines. Travel and activity providers, from airlines to accommodations to cruise lines, have instituted all forms of precautions to protect travelers from COVID. There's been an extraordinary amount of diligence working with health authorities to protect people, but we also want to understand how travelers view the necessity of these precautions. A quick call out on this: if the pandemic does die down within the next 12 months, which it hopefully will, we may very well start to see the emphasis on certain measures relax. But for now, we see that travelers are still feeling quite defensive over their health. Travelers have heard the push for face coverings loud and clear. They are one of the most common precautions to be deemed essential across providers. Travelers also don't try and play games with risk when it comes to face coverings. They express that coverings are similarly important for other passengers, visitors, or guests, as well as for staff. 50 to 78% consider mandated face coverings for other travelers an essential measure to book with a provider, and 52 to 79% consider it essential for staff. So this is evoking very similar rates of concern. Over past months, health experts have been revising their previous concerns about the dangers of surface contamination. However, travelers still place a great deal of emphasis on surface sanitization. Whether it's high-touch surfaces in transport like tray tables or touchscreen TVs, or light switches and remote controls in a hotel room, travelers want to know that surfaces will be frequently cleaned, with 57 to 78% of them considering it an essential measure. Distancing is also a key area of focus that has been absolutely drilled into people since the onset of the pandemic, and travelers report that they'll be looking for it to feel comfortable. But social distancing is seen as an end, and they are less concerned about the means that companies use to get there. While 52 to 73% of travelers consider distancing essential where possible, when we asked about a policy that helps enforce this, travelers consider it less important. Only 43 to 66% consider reducing capacity to be an essential need. When it comes to communicating to travelers why enforcement measures like reduced capacity are being made, know that distance is king. Anything that helps it to be enforced could be considered secondary or could be poorly understood by travelers. So take care to tell them when a new policy has been instituted specifically to help ensure social distancing. And finally, many travelers feel it to be of high importance that face coverings and tools like sanitizing wipes should be made available by travel providers as needed. While this is certainly considered good service, the fact that up to 75% of travelers consider it essential to have these things suggests something else. That travelers are looking for assurance that suppliers will do their utmost to protect them and ensure that other travelers are also going to be safe and follow the rules. When we see data like this, we really walk away with two main lessons. One is that considerate customer service is never going to go out of style, even in a world crisis. And the other is that it's really important for travelers to understand that the rules aren't symbolic here. They want to know that providers are stepping in to encourage people to behave responsibly right now. The perceptions of transport in the COVID era are changing, and there are three core rules that govern this. The first is that cars are the new frontrunner as an attractive means of getting people from point A to point B. The second is that using a car a traveler already owns or borrowed from someone they know is preferred over a rental car. And the third is that planes are not the only transport segment to be considered less attractive. All shared transit has suffered in changes of appeal. There was no contest when it came to which types of transport have gained the most appeal since COVID started. 45 to 58% of travelers say that cars they own or borrow are more appealing to them now than they were before the pandemic. But it's key that they know who has been using the car. There's a sense of stranger danger with rental cars since there isn't as much knowledge about how the car has been used or cleaned, and comparatively, travelers don't report it's gained nearly as much appeal. That sense of stranger danger is amplified with all forms of shared travel. Air has famously suffered a loss in this domain, but our research suggests that the core concern isn't a single form of transit so much as the idea of not controlling who travelers share space with. These numbers represent the percentage of travelers who claim that each form of shared transport has decreased in appeal for them since before the pandemic. I want to emphasize that while these numbers alone aren't indicators of exactly how ticket sales will fare in coming months for sectors or which sector will recover first, they all underscore exactly how much travelers are craving control over their space right now and how much they feel threatened by the possibility of dealing with a crowd. It is so important that travelers know that policies are in place to protect them, how much these policies can help them, and even to give travelers control over their surroundings whenever possible, because they're thinking of transport right now in an entirely different way than they used to. In terms of lodging, COVID has done a huge service to views on private accommodations. But there is an important catch. The sense of control is still key. Full home or apartment rentals were far more likely to increase in attraction for travelers than a room or space in a shared private home where they can lose control over cleanliness and privacy. For traditional hotels, travelers are often conflicted about how comfortable they feel in boutique hotels, but they consider large properties to be the riskiest of all, with up to a third claiming they have slid in appeal. Looking at more specific features, it was clear why this could be the case. Travelers say it feels far less appealing if they have to access their room via an elevator and find common areas far less appealing as well compared to before the pandemic. Two features practically synonymous with large hotels. Finally, in the world of tours and activities, we found that this is one area where size truly matters. Self-guided tours where travelers can have heaps of control over who they can come in contact with have sprung forward in appeal more than any other type of tour or activity that we tested. Comparatively, only 10% or less of travelers say that large tours and activities are more appealing to them than pre-COVID times. So wrapping up, there are some very promising signs of recovery that we've seen. The comfort with domestic travel within a year is huge. And people also feel that the world is opening up for them, but they're still tentative in feeling this out. They're looking for promises of safety, they're looking for control, and they're looking for easy transitions between holiday and their normal lives. But the people who have gotten a taste of travel in the past are eager to get back out. They're doing risk assessment, they're thinking their processes through, but they know that they want to travel again. This is going to be a winding path back to the travel we viewed as normal in the past, but we are already on the way there.